Many consider Cyclonic Rift to be the best board wiping commander. However, Cyclonic Rift costs a whopping 7 mana, and that makes it slower than cheaper options like Blasphemous Act or Toxic Deluge. But what if the devastating power of Cyclonic Rift was able to be harnessed for just a single blue mana? Every massive creature facing you? Gone. Every opposing value engine? Gone. Every friendship? Definitely gone. All of it blown away for just a single mana. My fellow blue players, this is indeed possible, with what I believe to be the most underrated Izzet commander. And that commander is Kaza Roil Chaser. Kaza is a 2-mana 1/2 human wizard with flying and haste, and an activated ability that reads tap. The next instant or sorcery spell you cast this turn costs X less to cast, where X is the number of wizards you control as this ability resolves. This ability is extremely powerful, as it will allow us to cast big and impactful spells for just 1 or 2 mana. However, in most of the games I've played with this deck, Kaza manages to stay under the radar. That is, until it's too late. Imagine it. With Kaza and 5 other wizards in play, you cast Cyclonic Rift for just a single blue mana. Imagine the faces of your opponents after witnessing such heinous and degenerate mana cheating. This deck list is either a high-level bracket 3 commander deck or low-level bracket 4 deck. Now let's start by going over the wizards that will aid us in our mana cheating scheme. Deranged Assistant taps for a colorless mana that can be used on anything, whereas Volsci Tideturner and Kurfell Harbinger each tap for a blue mana that can only be used on instants or sorceries, which, if we're being honest, is not much of a restriction for an Izzet deck. Stony Brook Banneret reduces the cost of our wizards, while Goblin Electromancer and Stormcatch Mentor reduce the cost of our instants and sorceries. Enclave Cryptologist, Fairy Seer, and Hapless Researcher all provide us with cheap card selection. Keep in mind that 1-mana wizards are very good in this deck because Kaza's ability will essentially refund us the mana used to play them. Dark Mystic is included to draw us cards and offer our opponents some goodwill, while we plot their demise. At 2 mana, we have Augur of Bolas, Thunder Trap Trainer, and Magmatic Channeler, all of which provide us with some card advantage. Information Dealer lets us reorder cards from the top of our deck depending on the number of wizards we control. This is one of the best cards in the deck, and it's at its best when used during our upkeep before we draw for turn. Lastly, for card draw, we have Magus of the Wheel to refill our hand after playing out all of our cheap wizards. For interaction, we have some wizards with abilities that can counter spells. Curse Catcher can counter instants and sorceries if the caster is tapped out. Benevolent Hermit can counter any non-creature spell and it can return as Benevolent Geist from the graveyard. However, our best counterspell wizard is Patron Wizard. Patron Wizard allows us to use any number of untapped wizards to counter any spell unless his controller pays 1 mana for each wizard tapped this way. In my experience, opponents often forget about this ability until it's too late. Siren Stormtamer can counter a spell that targets you, or more likely, Kaza. Yes, eventually, after you've won several games in a row, your opponents will realize that Kaza is in fact broken, and then they will try to remove her, so you will then have to protect her. However, most of the other wizards in this deck aren't really worth saving. Just don't tell them I said that. Some wizards that might be worth saving are those with this deck's favorite word written on them, untap. Puppeteer can untap Kaza for 1 mana, while Clever Conjurer does it for free, but only at sorcery speed. However, the best untapping wizard in this deck is without a doubt a Fetal Alchemist, who not only has a superior activated ability, but is also 1 mana cheaper. This deck only runs 4 wizards that cost more than 3 mana, and they're all insanely powerful. Asami Lady of Scrolls will allow us to run away with card advantage if she goes unanswered. Disciple of the Ring can do many things after paying 1 mana and exiling an instant and sorcery from our graveyard, including countering spells and utilizing our favorite word potentially multiple times in the same turn. Cyclonic Summoner in this deck is a Cyclonic Rift attached to a 7/7 body, whereas Galecaster Colossus gives all of our wizards the ability to tap and bounce any non-land permanent an opponent controls. I know from personal experience that opponents find him to be extremely annoying. Rounding out our starting lineup of wizards, we have the Modern All-Star Snapcaster Mage, who allows us to reuse one of our spells, and since Flashback counts as casting a spell, Kaza can use her ability in tandem to reduce that spell's cost. Lastly, we have Triska Decaphile, who can win us the game if we have 13 cards in hand at the beginning of our upkeep. she also looks rather inconspicuous tucked within our wizard army, and often gets overlooked. However, this deck is capable of drawing up to 13 cards in the blink of an eye and seemingly out of nowhere, and that makes her a surprisingly reliable win condition. Now let's talk spells. Frantic Search is good card selection and can be used to net us mana when paired with Kaza's ability. Inspired Tinkering is basically a fair and balanced version of Jeska's Will, but with Kaza it becomes Impulse Draw 3 cards and create 3 treasure tokens for just 1 red mana, so significantly less fair and balanced. Also, I always believe that Fact or Fiction should just be 1 mana. Intellectual Offering is one of the best cards in the deck. It can also be played for 1 mana, and it has our deck's favorite word. Although we are required to give 3 cards worth of charity to the mono-white or Boros player at the table. Speaking of white mana, Scour from Existence gives us Izzet players unconditional exile removal for any permanent. Kaza's ability will turn the 7 mana spell into very efficient removal, potentially even costing 0 mana. For counterspells, we are running Classic Counterspell, Wizard's Retort, and Offer You Can't Refuse, and Sublime Epiphany, which Kaza can easily turn into a 2 mana counterspell. There is also March of Swirling Mist, an anti-board wipe card that fits Kaza like a glove. If Kaza is untapped, this card will always just cost 1 blue mana. Both Mana Geyser and Brass's Bounty can generate a lot of mana and can be game-ending if they get copied a few times. Volcanic Vision acts as both an instant and sorcery recursion spell and as a one-sided board wipe if the spell targeted has a high mana value, such as Overflowing Insight, which allows us to draw 7 cards for as little as 3 mana with Kaza. But that's light work compared to this deck's several Draw X spells. It should go without saying that Kaza's ability works wonders with X spells. Pulled from Tomorrow can be played at instant speed, allowing you to keep Kaza's ability available during your opponent's turns. Invoke the Firemind can alternatively be used as creature or player removal. Finale of Revelation, when cast for 10 or more, gives us a permanent no maximum hand size, and it untaps 5 lands, potentially netting us mana with Kaza's ability. However, the best draw X spell in the deck is Transcendent Message, because not only is it an instant, but it also has Convoke, meaning this spell can potentially be played for free by tapping blue wizards, and draw us a whole lot of cards. As for game enders, Jaya's Immolating Inferno is straight to the point when we have enough mana and mana cheating. Blatant Thievery will give us our opponent's best stuff. Apex of Power will give us 10 mana when it's cast from our hand, and 7 cards to spend that mana on. However, the main win condition cards are Finale of Promise and Surge to Victory. Finale of Promise, when cast for 10 or more, will copy both an instant and sorcery from our graveyard 3 times each. Surge to Victory increases the power of our wizards by the target spell's mana value, and copies that spell for each creature that deals combat damage to a player this turn. However, if you're still not satisfied with this firepower, there is one more card that truly is this deck's heavy artillery. And that card is Roil Fire. Roil Fire used to be banned in Commander, and for 9 mana, it exiles all permanents, all cards in hand, all graveyards, and leaves each player at 1 life. Simply use Kaza's ability to reduce Worldfire's cost, then cast Worldfire, but make sure you float enough mana to recast Kaza from the command zone. If Worldfire resolves, your opponents will have nothing in play or in their hands, and then you will cast Kaza, who will run around the table one-shotting each opponent. Now, technically, mass land removal is frowned upon in bracket 3. However, that rule is in context of resource denial and stacks strategies. This deck is using Worldfire as a late game combo, which I believe makes it allowable in bracket 3. What do you guys think? Leave a comment down below. Per bracket 3 rules, the 3 allowed game changers for this deck are Fierce Guardianship, Jeska's Will, and of course, Cyclonic Rift. As most of you are likely aware, these cards are very powerful and are also rather expensive. At the end of this video, I have included 25 cards that each cost less than $1 and are viable budget alternatives that are almost as good as these expensive staples. That said, if you're only going to buy one expensive card for this deck, I would 100% recommend that card be Cyclonic Rift, as it is the best card in the deck by a wide margin. A 1-mana Cyc Rift will often leave you in a dominant position to easily win the game. As for tutors, we are running Vidalcan Evermage, who rather understandably hates slivers and has wizard cycling, allowing us to discard him and search our deck for any wizard to put into our hand. Solve the Equation tutors for any instant or sorcery, whereas Spellseeker tutors for an instant or sorcery that costs 2 or less. This includes Cyclonic Rift and several other great cards in our deck. we are also running Mystic Remora with on-theme artwork as the lone enchantment in the deck. We are running a light ramp package because Kaza will allow our wizard deck to ramp enough to make an elf deck jealous. Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Izzet Signet, and Thought Vessel can all be found in nearly every Izzet commander deck. We are also running Patriarch's Seal as it has our deck's favorite word. Now for the lands. Command Tower, Scalding Tarn, Steam Vents, Training Center, Fiery Islet, Frostboil Snarl, Cascade Bluffs, Sulphur Falls, Stormcarved Coast, Shivan Reef, Izzet Boilworks, Volatile Fjord, River Glide Pathway, and Temple of Epiphany are our Izzet dual lands. Additionally, the tribal lands of Secluded Courtyard, Unclaimed Territory, and Path of Ancestry also help fix our mana. For utility lands, the deck runs Reliquary Tower, Mirrored Landscape, Riptide Laboratory, which goes well with Cyclone Summoner, Mystic Sanctuary, because the only thing more fun than casting a single 1-mana Cyclonic Rift is doing it again. And lastly, the best land in the deck is Minamo, School at Water's Edge, because it has our deck's favorite word and is unlikely to be removed. 8 islands and 5 mountains. Bring the land count to 35. Please feel free to build a land base according to your budget. Just keep in mind that this deck is 75% blue. And now it's time for the budget round. If Fierce Guardianship is out of your price range, might I recommend you try Mana Drain? Sorry, I meant Spell Swindle, which Kaza can turn into a mana drain that makes treasures instead of colorless mana. Reinterpret and Negate are also great counterspells to consider for this deck. Jeska's Will is a bit harder to replace, but Battle Hymn and Pirate's Pillage can both get you additional mana. Electro Dominance, Magnum Opus, and Chaos Warp are also solid includes. Now the best budget replacements for Cyclonic Rift in this deck are Aetherize, Aether Spouts, and especially Distorting Wake, which allows you to bounce X amount of non-land permanents. Cyclonic Rift's red cousin, Mizzium Mortars, is also a good choice. One-sided board wastes are heavily preferred in this deck because we don't want to lose all of our wizards and be left with no way to mana cheat on big spells. Now for some good budget wizards. The Emperor of Palmesia, Burning Prophet, Voldalian Arcanist, Archaeomancer, Gadwick the Wizened, and Windrider Wizard are all good options as replacements for the more expensive wizards in this deck. Goblin Wizardry is also a good pick because it can generate 2 wizard tokens at instant speed. Dig Through Time and Diviner's Portent are good for additional card draw, and Step Through is a bounce spell with wizard cycling. You can also include untapped spells like Twiddle and Dreamscript. Simply cast these spells and then tap Kaza in response to double her ability. Though when I tried out these cards, I found them to be very limited and situational, as they were only useful when I already had a good board state and an X spell in hand. However, if you do wish to take this route, I recommend Fleeting Reflection as the best version of this effect because it can double as a protection spell for Kaza. And that concludes the budget round. If you liked the video and want to see more deck techs like this one in the future, then please leave a like and subscribe. Then share this video with a friend you think would love an evil deck like this one. There's a link to the full deck list in the description. Thanks for watching.